The RFK Jr. dropout.
Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory.
After more than a year of campaigning, RFK Jr. stood before a crowd in Arizona and announced he would be ending his insurgent effort 73 days before Election Day, putting his weight squarely behind Donald Trump, who is set to hold his own event today, also in Arizona, where RFK's endorsement is expected to be front and center. But what, if any, impact will RFK's dropout have on the race? We're on the ground in Arizona to find out. And
look at 8 years ago and you think it was a lot easier for me. Will that memory impact how you vote in November?
That memory, although good, I'll just, again, look to find whoever has policies that align more closely with what I'm looking to do today.
Mortgage rates may have fallen to their lowest levels in more than a year, but that hasn't stopped starter homes from costing more than they ever have. Tonight, we report on the out-of-reach American dream for millions of people. Good evening. I'm Phil Lipoff in tonight for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We are following those stories and, of course, much more, including the developing news as we come on in the air, reports of a deadly knife attack in Germany. The latest, what we're learning. The former pilot accused of trying to crash a passenger jet with 84 people on board and awaiting trial. Why he says he took psychedelic mushrooms 2 days before that flight. Plus the big economic news tonight with the Federal Reserve announcing, quote, the time has come for interest rate cuts. But when will they happen and when could you feel the difference in your wallet? And a massive explosion tearing apart this home, the victims and the investigation. But we are going to begin tonight with that new phase in the race for the White House. With the nominating conventions now over, we are 74 days now until the election. And tonight, Donald Trump has received a high-profile endorsement from Robert Kennedy Jr. Question is, will it change the race? Vice President Kamala Harris and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff left Chicago after that high-energy week at the Democratic Convention. Meantime, former President Trump was courting voters in the swing state of Nevada with sharp words for his opponent. Now, into the mix, Robert Kennedy Jr. has suspended his campaign endorsing Donald Trump. But will his supporters do the same? The two teaming up in a bid to stop Kamala Harris riding a wave of momentum capped by her acceptance speech and her promise of, quote, a new way forward. The presidential campaign is now intensifying just 17 days until the ABC presidential debate and early voting beginning soon after that in some states. ABC's Rachel Scott leaves us off tonight from Washington.
Tonight, just hours after delivering her historic acceptance speech in Chicago, a confident Vice President Kamala Harris heading back to Washington, D.C. to a new phase in the campaign.
I'm suspending my campaign.
Into the news, independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suspending his bid for the White House, endorsing former President Donald Trump, hoping to stop Harris's momentum.
We just had a very nice endorsement from RFK Jr., Bobby.
Trump campaigning in swing state Nevada on the attack.
Kamala, have you ever heard of her, Kamala?
Kennedy expected to join the former president later tonight in Arizona, telling supporters he is working to remove his name from the ballot in battleground states like Arizona and Pennsylvania, where he could be a spoiler for Trump.
And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities.
Kennedy's siblings putting out a statement today, calling his endorsement of Trump a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear, calling it a sad ending to a sad story. There are just 74 days to go, and this race is extremely tight. With Kennedy pulling 5% in our latest poll, which direction his supporters go could make a difference. Harris's campaign making the pitch to Kennedy voters, saying Vice President Harris wants to earn your support, adding for any American out there who is tired of Donald Trump and is looking for a new way forward, ours is a campaign for you. Harris capping a whirlwind 4 weeks, closing out the Democratic National Convention.
On behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination
leaning into her background as a prosecutor and laying out the case against Trump.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails.
All right, let's get right to Rachel. And Rachel, you're learning more about a fundraiser that's going to happen in support of January 6 defendants that will be held at Trump's Bedminster Golf Club. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, Phil, this is being hosted by a nonprofit that supports those who have been charged in connection to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And so they will be holding this fundraiser at Trump's Bedminster Golf Club in just a matter of weeks in September. We are told by Trump officials that the former president does not plan to attend the event. We are also told that it will be fully paid for by that nonprofit. But in the past, the former president has fully embraced those who stormed the Capitol that day. In fact, he told me just a few weeks ago he would be willing to pardon the rioters who were convicted of assaulting police officers, Phil.
All right, Rachel Scott from Washington tonight. Rachel, thank you. And as we've been mentioning, the race for the White House was stirred up even more today with RFK Jr. announcing he's suspending his campaign. For more on the potential impacts of that, we want to bring in Selena Wang right now, ABC News senior White House correspondent. Selena, this man was once a progressive Democrat. I come from Massachusetts, where whatever your politics are, the Kennedy name is sacred. And people who might not have been following this race close enough might be surprised that he is now endorsing former President Trump, but he's really been heading down this path for a while now, hasn't he?
But, Phil, it still is a stunning development. I mean, RFK Jr. was a lifelong Democrat, then turned independent. But the idea that he would be endorsing Donald Trump, that would have been unthinkable not very long ago. But since Harris got into this race, his campaign has been struggling more. His poll numbers have been dropping further. But RFK's campaign, it's really one that's been fueled by these anti-establishment views, vaccine skepticism, and the really embracement of conspiracy theories. And his family has been shunning his views and his endorsement of Trump. His siblings put out a statement today calling his endorsement a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear, calling it a sad ending to his sad story. But Phil, the question now is what Kennedy gets in return for this endorsement. He has been seeking a cabinet, some sort of position in the Trump administration, according to sources. And in his speech today, he said that Donald Trump would, quote, enlist him in his administration.
He also told supporters in Phoenix, Selena, this afternoon that he won't, quote, spoil Trump's chances in battleground states. Let's take a listen.
If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible.
So it's $1 million question tonight. How do you think RFK Jr. dropping out impacts this race?
This could make a very tight race even tighter. Now, polling shows that he is polling somewhere in the mid-single digits, but the direction in terms of where those voters go is not entirely clear. Now, 538, they did do a poll analyzing the difference between polls that include RFK Jr. versus the polls that do not, and they find that the net effect of RFK Jr. dropping out is small. The number shows that it reduces Harris's margin from plus 3.3 to plus 3.1. But at the same time, every vote is going to count in this election, and the Trump campaign is betting that this could be consequential in some of those battleground states that would be decided by just thousands of votes. At the same time, the Harris campaign tells me they're not too worried about this because they believe that many of those voters who supported RFK Jr. were disaffected and may just not go to the polls because they were not happy with either choice.
All right, Selena Wang tonight. Selena, thank you. Let's get now to Republican strategist Tricia McLaughlin. She was a senior advisor to presidential primary candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Tricia, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us, especially on a Friday night in the summer. Close allies of Donald Trump had quietly been urging RFK Jr. to drop out and endorse Trump for some time. I'm wondering, do you think this endorsement now will be sort of the win that they were looking for?
I think it will be. I think that this is absolutely a gift to Donald Trump. Tony Fabrizio, who's Trump's internal pollster, released a memo showing that in most of these battleground states, it breaks for Trump. And in these very narrow margin states, such as Georgia or Arizona, where Biden won by, say, 10,000 votes, this could make a real difference. But addressing what Selena said earlier about the Kamala Harris campaign saying, hey, we don't really care, I have to counter that. Their war room account, Kamala HQ, is already attacking RFK. If they don't think, or if they think that they can court RFK voters, that is a terrible tactic. You still want those voters to pull the lever for Kamala Harris. So why personally attack the guy who they were behind first?
All right, well, put on your campaign hat for this question, too. Today, RFK talked about a post in the Trump administration, but when Trump was asked about it, he kind of dodged that question for now. I mean, it's all just kind of happening, broadly praising Kennedy instead. Do you see Kennedy as a contender for a Trump White House job? And what kind of role do you see him perhaps taking on in the campaign as it moves forward?
I think he'll take on a role in the campaign as courting those independent and undecided and more anti-establishment voters. I think he did a great job today about talking about the mental health crisis in this country and largely the obesity crisis in this country, which I think is largely related but not discussed enough. So I really hope that he does have him as more of that subject matter and that niche group expert. That all being said, as far as an administration post, we got to win first, so let's get to November. But second of all, this is Donald Trump. It's kind of art of the deal. It's what serves him win and what serves the country win.
Yeah, good point. We are fresh off the heels of the DNC with the first Harris-Trump debate rapidly approaching. It will be here on ABC. What, if any, challenges do you see the Trump campaign facing as we move toward November?
I think we got to stick to policy. Because, Phil, if we stick to policy, Donald Trump wins on the issues every single time, whether it be lowering costs, regulations, immigration, foreign policy, pretty much every issue that's on the top of minds of voters, Donald Trump does well in. But when he gets into those personal attacks, those ad hominem attacks, that's where we lose ground. And that's where you start to see the Kamala Harris momentum. She has momentum largely because she's going off vibes and virality. The media is largely pushing that they're having so much fun, that this is such a joy campaign. But the reality on the ground is it's getting to seem a little silly and a little shallow if you don't actually have policies that are saying how we're going to lower the cost for the American people that have gone up 20% since she's been in office. What are you going to do about the immigration crisis? 10 to 15 million people have illegally entered this country since she came into office. And believe it or not, and this is such a disturbing report, there's 32,000 migrant children missing in this country. That is modern day child slavery and something we absolutely need to solve as a country. So she's got to get to the substance because Americans are starved for substance. We've been really fed a bunch of style, but let's get down to the issues.
Yeah, well, conventions, as you know, are generally about that. But you can bet that at the ABC debate coming up, there will be policy debates and exchanges.
They have good music, though, Phil. I'll give them that. That's for sure.
They did. All right, Trisha, thanks so much. Always a pleasure. For more now, let's bring in Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, the former mayor of Baltimore and former secretary of the Democratic National Committee. Thank you for joining us on a Friday night. Do appreciate it. At the Democratic National Convention in 2016, Kamala Harris didn't even have a speaking role. So I'm wondering what you think her rise in the Democratic Party is all about.
It's funny. I remember passing Vice President Kamala Harris in the hallway in the Comcast Center, I believe it was in Philadelphia, where the event was being held. And I talked to her because, we had known each other for a few years and asked her how she was doing. And I remember her saying that she was not going to be on the agenda for the convention. And we sort of looked at each other with that knowing look because I knew that she is someone that the Democratic Party should be holding up as this next generation leader. And the fact that she is where she is today really renews my faith in the party and our country. I love to see it, and I am very proud of her and happy for her ascension.
I'm sure you watched this today. RFK Jr. endorsing Donald Trump. He also blamed the DNC for pushing him out of the race, saying the DNC, quote, waged a war on him. Take a listen to what he said.
The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters.
He made quite a few allegations today. I'm wondering what your response to that specific allegation is.
My response is twofold. Considering he is now endorsing someone who whines on a daily basis, the fact that RFK Jr. is whining about being in a race and the Democratic Party being tough on him, put on your big boy pants. You're in an election for the president of the most powerful country in the world. This is gloves off. This is a game for or an endeavor for tough people, who can take the gloves off and do what needs to be done. If he were president, is he going to complain because one of our adversaries was tough on him? It's silly, and it's shameful to the legacy of his family. But it doesn't surprise me that he winds up endorsing someone who whines for sport.
What do you think the impact is going to be? I mean, the crystal ball question here, but him suspending his campaign in swing states specifically, what do you think the impact will be?
I do not think we should brush this under the rug as something that is not going to matter. We know that this election will be decided by a very few number of voters in a very few number of districts. And if he can get these ultra fringe voters who are Kennedy files that love the family and think that he's the next generation of what it means to lead in this country, if he can get them off the couch or out of their basements and to the polls, that might make a difference. So I think it is a mistake to think that this is not a potential threat to Vice President Harris's efforts.
Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, former mayor of Baltimore. Madam Mayor, thanks so much for taking the time tonight. Do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We want to turn now to 538's Galen Druk. Galen, it is good to have you with us because I've been asking all of our previous guests what they think is going to happen here. You actually have some numbers about this. Only about 4% of voters said they plan to vote Kennedy in the fall, but in terms of favorability, he had about 40% unfavorable and 34% favorable. So, what do we know about RFK Jr.'s supporters? Are they likely to become Trump supporters as he's asked them to be?
Yeah, let me try to break this down by looking back a month. So when Biden dropped out of the race, before he dropped out of the race, RFK Jr.'s support in the polls was around 8%. After Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris took the helm of the Democratic Party, that was halved. So today his support is closer to 4%. Much of that support probably was people who were inclined to support Democrats but unhappy with Biden and parking their support with RFK Jr. A lot of that has probably now gone to Kamala Harris and helped fuel her rise to where she is leading nationally and across many battleground states today. So the question is, of that 4.5% that is remaining for Kennedy, what inclination do they have? Are they more supportive of Trump? The analysis that my colleagues did at 538 suggests by a hair. So they're slightly more supportive of Trump. But you also have to ask the question of if these people were supporting RFK Jr. before, when they had the option of Trump or Biden, will Kennedy's move now move them towards Trump? I mean, Trump was always an option. This isn't a new option for them, and yet they were still supporting RFK Jr. So folks who oftentimes support independent candidates are really just fed up with the two-party system, don't like Democrats or Republicans in many cases, and so they also now have the option of, say, voting for a Green Party candidate or voting for a Libertarian candidate or not voting at all.
This is what I find so fascinating about politics. We'll all hypothesize about the numbers now, but we will know eventually after the election what happened. By all accounts, Kennedy's support was declining. You've been showing us those numbers. How many people are we talking about here? Is it enough, do you think, to sway the results one way or the other in terms of the number of people?
Yeah, it all comes down to how close this election ends up being. So right now, Harris is leading in the northern battleground states by between 2 and 4 points. That's within the margin of error. And I don't even think we can necessarily expect that lead to hold. There's 2 months or more of campaigning left to go in this race. There is an interesting trend, though, that if you look across the battleground states, there are places where RFK Jr. has a bit more support than others. One of those places is Arizona, that actually has a strong history of supporting more independent candidates. And that's probably no surprise that he gave his speech in Arizona today, and the rally is in Arizona tonight. And so perhaps in a state like that, there's a little more edge that he can throw in Trump's direction. But in a place like Wisconsin, the tipping point state for the Electoral College in the last 2 presidential elections, his support is closer to 3%. So this is all to say, we have yet to see. We will have more information in the coming week.
All right, 538's Galen Druk, always great to have you with us and your insights. RFK Jr. is set to join Trump in Arizona at any moment. We'll bring you that once it happens. Overseas now to breaking news in Germany, where someone attacked people with a knife at a festival in a horrific stabbing rampage. The suspect appears to have knifed people at random, and there are fatalities. ABC's James Longman joins us now. James, what more are you learning about this attack?
Yeah, Phil, looks like multiple victims in this stabbing attack in the west of Germany. This is the city of Solingen, where a festival was underway. We understand just before 10 o'clock tonight, a man with a knife went on this rampage, stabbing people at random. The police have told us he killed 3 people. 4 others have been seriously injured. Emergency workers are on the scene as we speak, resuscitating victims. And it looks like all this happened in the city centre. This was a festival throughout the city of diversity. 80,000 people were due to attend over 3 days. There was music being played on a stage in the city centre. This attack looks to have happened very close to there, but all of that has now been cancelled. The police have put out a major alert. The city is on lockdown because this individual is right now still on the run. Phil?
Still searching. All right, James Longman, thank you. On to other news tonight. At least 5 Secret Service officers involved in planning security for the rally where former President Trump was shot have been put on administrative leave. And as the investigation widens, even more senior officials could be caught up in the review. ABC Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas with more.
Tonight, at least 5 Secret Service agents reassigned as the investigation intensifies into whether they played a role in the failures that led to the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Sources telling ABC News those agents were involved in the planning of the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, now on administrative duty, no longer allowed to work on protection of any candidates. Late today, Trump responded.
They've never provided us with the number of people that we should have had for the massive rallies that we had, like the size of Butler.
The move coming nearly 6 weeks after Thomas Matthew Crooks, seen here before he opened fire, killed 1 man and wounded 3 others, including the former president. And tonight, the Butler County District Attorney telling ABC News that local police offered their radios to the Secret Service during the rally, but the agents never used them. A preliminary congressional report claiming agents never even picked them up.
Yeah, look, there he is.
Critical seconds being wasted.
Officer.
The Secret Service never hearing the radio traffic that may have allowed them to quickly remove Trump from the stage before shots were fired.
He's straight up. He's got a book bag. He's got mad AR laying down. Yeah, he's laying down, burned out, book bag next to him.
Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe acknowledging agents did not hear the crucial radio traffic.
There was clearly radio transmissions that may have happened on that local radio net that we did not have.
And tonight, the Speaker of the House saying placing the agents on administrative duty is a first step, but, quote, nowhere near enough. He vowed congressional investigations into the failures will continue. Phil?
Pierre Thomas from Washington. Pierre, thank you. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the time has come for a shift toward interest rate cuts. The Reserve is expected to cut rates at its next meeting in September by either 1/4 or 0.5%. The announcement coming after a years-long effort to fight inflation with highly elevated interest rates and in light of new data that shows a cooling labor market. Powell saying the Fed needed to be confident that inflation is moving sustainably downward to a target rate of 2% before instituting rate cuts. Thousands of people in Gaza forced to flee again today after the IDF issued evacuation orders for 2 cities in southern Gaza. The Palestinian Health Ministry says several Palestinians were killed by Israeli shelling while fleeing in Jabalia today. Between July 1st and August 21st, at least 16 evacuation orders have been issued by Israeli forces in Gaza. That's according to Doctors Without Borders. And nearly 2 million people, over 85% of the entire population of Gaza, has been displaced by this war, often multiple times. Back here in this country, an update now on the shocking case of that pilot accused of trying to crash an Alaska Airlines passenger's jet. He's now telling his side of the story as he awaits trial. He said he's looking to raise awareness about the issue of mental health in the cockpit. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
Tonight, former Alaska Airlines pilot Joseph Emerson is telling his side of the story after he was pulled off a flight in cuffs for allegedly trying to crash a passenger jet.
It's 30 seconds of my life I wish I could change, and I can't.
Last October, he was hitching a ride in the cockpit jump seat on a flight from Everett, Washington to San Francisco when he says he began to hallucinate.
There was a feeling of being trapped. Like, am I trapped in this airplane? This is not real. I need to wake up.
He stood up in the cockpit and pulled these red handles that are meant to shut off the engines in the case of a fire. Thankfully, it didn't work.
Did you know what the levers were at the time?
What I thought is, this is going to wake me up. I know what those levers do in a real airplane, right? And I need to wake up from this.
2 days before the flight, Emerson says he took psychedelic mushrooms, hoping that it would help with depression. He blames that and a lack of sleep for the episode.
Coming into this, I hadn't really been sleeping a lot the night that I took the magic mushrooms, and I did not sleep that night. And so this cumulative sleep deficit, I believe, may have also impacted just my perception of what was going on.
Emerson says he'd been suffering from depression ever since his friend Scott died suddenly, but never sought psychiatric treatment, worrying that a formal diagnosis could end his career. He instead turned to alcohol and eventually those psychedelic mushrooms.
Right now, there's a perception out there that if you raise your hand and say something's not right, there's a very real possibility that you don't fly again.
Emerson now speaking about it all in the new documentary, The New York Times Presents Lie to Fly on FX. And along with his wife, Sarah, he's working to raise awareness about mental health in the cockpit, launching a nonprofit called Clear Skies Ahead.
Sarah and I would like our story to be of some value, right? We think it tells a larger story on pilot health.
And Emerson faces 83 counts of recklessly endangering another person and 1 count of endangering aircraft in the first degree. He's pleaded not guilty. The New York Times Presents Lie to Fly airs tonight at 10 p.m. on FX and starts streaming tomorrow on Hulu. Phil?
All right, Gio, thank you. There is still much more to get to here tonight on Prime. A massive explosion ripping apart this home, the victims, and the investigation into what happened. But next, as the DNC was underway in Chicago, Arcana Whitworth met up with a hopeful home buyer in that area, what she hopes to hear from the candidates about the economy and the housing market in our Prime Focus.
Whenever news breaks,
we are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In rolling forward, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Travel
traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines, from southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip.
In Beirut.
From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions. Nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag.
Not a carry in it.
How important it made to USA. Great work.
Hi, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismael? David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
I watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different.
The critics agree.
Hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything. Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium. 1985? I think we could have.
They both want to be your next president. Now finally, Kamala Harris.
Do we believe in the promise of America?
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face. Historic. The ABC News presidential debate, moderated by David Muir and Linsey Davis. Tuesday, September 10th, live on ABC and streaming on ABC News Live, Hulu, and Disney+. The ABC News presidential debate.
Welcome back. Mortgage rates have fallen to their lowest level in more than a year, but with starter homes costing more than $1 million in more than 200 U.S. cities, buying a home feels out of reach for so many first-time buyers. Kana Whitworth speaks to a single mother in the South Chicago suburbs about the challenging economy and real estate market as she looks to buy a bigger home for her family in the same city where Democrats just held their national convention this week. Here's Kana with more.
For more than a year, LaToya Trotter has been working with her real estate agent Shannon Welch to buy a new house in the Chicago area.
Let's see what inside looks like.
Interest rates have dropped from their 23-year high, but they are nowhere near the 3% that homeowners enjoyed in 2020. And home prices are at an all-time high, which dramatically increases the cost of moving.
In a lower interest rate, if it were to dip a little bit more, I mean, you could be talking about saving hundreds of dollars every month.
And to the millionaires out there, $100, a couple hundred may not be substantial, but for the middle class, a couple $100, it matters.
The current monthly payment for a median-priced home has more than doubled since 2019, according to the National Association of Realtors. In more than 200 U.S. cities, it now costs $1 million to buy a starter home.
It's sad because there are people in America that will never make $1 million in their lifetime. So how can they afford $1 million home?
What's the price point that you're looking at?
So regretfully, and I never saw this in a million years, it's the $400,000 range.
And so here you are, a single mother, you're an electrical engineer, you are a homeowner already.
Yes.
And to think that your next step is just slightly out of reach because the housing market is so crazy.
Yes.
How does that make you feel?
It is upsetting.
And her driving force? Her daughter's future. Adania is 14 and is a freshman at a private Catholic high school 30 minutes away from their South Chicago home. And that home, Trotter bought in an all-cash offer for $45,000 in 2020.
Like I said, all packed up with nowhere to go.
We joined as they toured a few homes with Shannon. The first one was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home listed for $340,000. Next up, a 5-bedroom, 3-bath home listed for over $459,000. As you walked through this house, were you imagining yourselves living here?
I'm so glad you asked that question because actually I did. Some of the other ones, not so much.
Her agent, well, just keeping a keen eye on the market. And while she doesn't dismiss Harris's plan to build 3 million new housing units if elected, she thinks in Chicago, that plan misses the mark.
We have tons of inventory throughout Chicagoland. We have hundreds of properties on auction. We have properties that are abandoned.
While Trump has yet to lay out specifics on a plan for housing, the Republican National Party this year pledged to promote home ownership through tax incentives. Harris outlined a plan to help first-generation home buyers with a down payment of up to $25,000.
They need it. They just need to make a bill to offer that to every home buyer in America.
And who will have that grasp come November? In a new poll, respondents trust Trump to handle the economy and inflation by 9 points, and more than 85% of adults consider that a top issue in their vote for president. And it's the broken trust that has voters on edge.
You look at 8 years ago and you think it was a lot easier for me. Will that memory impact how you vote in November?
That memory, although good, I'll just, again, look to find whoever has policies that align more closely with what I'm looking to do today.
So it's not about what was done in the past, it's about what are you going to do in the future?
It's not about the past, it's about looking forward.
Our thanks to Kana Whitworth for that. So many looking forward to the future, especially in housing. There's still much more to get to tonight. Coming up, they are a hit at parties for all ages, but what dangers are lurking in plain sight? Nightline's Byron Pitts takes a look. But next, the rising number of people suffering from loneliness and the toll it's taking on all of us by the numbers.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions. Operational nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it.
Not a tear in it.
How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work. Hi. Where are you? Where are you? Appreciate you. Thank you, David. Good to meet you. Ismail? David.
David.
Yes, yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast. Whenever news breaks,
We are here in Israel, a nation at war.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this town.
From Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike.
ABC News Live everywhere.
In Iceland, let's go.
On the 2024 campaign trail.
Here at 10 Downing Street.
Wherever the story is.
We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it. I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry. It's shocking. My stomach just dropped. He just really didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, A Father's Secret, the all-new season on Hulu.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning. To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, This is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
Give it to me. Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food.
It's all coming up on GMA3.
You're going to love it. We'll see you then.
GMA3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, afternoons.
For everything you need to know.
I love that.
Me too.
Reporting from the 2024 Democratic Convention in Chicago, I'm Jay O'Brien. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back. The American Academy of Family Physicians recently issued a report calling on doctors to screen their patients for signs of loneliness. They say it's a significant medical issue and it's affecting more and more people. So here's a look at it by the numbers. 58% of Americans now say they are lonely. That's up from 46% in 2018, according to a survey by Cigna Health Insurance. The changing ways we work, fueling much of the rise in loneliness. More than 40% of remote workers said they go days without leaving the house. That's according to a Bright Horizons poll last year. And those who work in an office still spend nearly 1/4 of their time in virtual meetings and only 8% of their time in face-to-face meetings, according to data from the real estate company Cushman & Wakefield. Overall, our time spent in meetings has tripled in recent years, data from Microsoft shows, and that leaves less time for those casual interactions that social scientists say foster happiness. It may explain why just 68% of workers on the professional coaching platform BetterUp said that they know their coworkers on a personal level. That's down from 79% just 5 years ago. All that isolation comes with a cost, $154 billion a year in employee absenteeism alone, according to Cigna. And more concerning, doctors say social isolation is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of premature death. So some troubling numbers there indeed. And there is much more ahead tonight here on Prime. The growing trend to drink little or no alcohol, why the Sober Curious movement is going mainstream. But first, Up in Smoke, a tragic end for an iconic 1930s ball field.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed.
Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas,
Edinburgh, Scotland, from Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw.
Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation.
You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. Raleigh, North Carolina.
The U.S. Capitol.
Mayfield, Kentucky.
Minneapolis.
Mexico.
Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
Getting you behind the stories as they happen, giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live.
ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight.
Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
Whenever news breaks.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this town.
From Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting. From the scene of that deadly missile strike.
ABC News Live everywhere.
In Iceland, let's go.
On the 2024 campaign trail.
Here at 10 Downing Street.
Wherever the story is.
We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere.
Let's go.
The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead. Tag on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer.
It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
Get ready, America, every Friday.
The hottest trends, styles, and must-have. What's the right stuff to buy right now? I really love that. It's time to buy the right stuff.
Yes!
And save big time, too.
The right stuff.
Fridays on GMA. You're going to love it.
They both want to be your next president. Now, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, face to face. The ABC News presidential debate, moderated by David Muir and Linsey Davis. Tuesday, September 10th, live on ABC and streaming on Hulu and Disney+.
Breaking news we want to bring to you right now. I want to bring you out to Glendale, Arizona, where former President Trump is having a rally. And you see there, just behind him to his right is RFK Jr., just hours after he suspended his presidential campaign and endorsed former President Trump. He is at a rally with him in Glendale, Arizona. Let's listen in.
It's true. Amazing. Soon after I can't even believe I have to say this, nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania last month, Bobby called me to express his best wishes. He knows firsthand the risks incurred by leaders who stand up to the corrupt political establishment. When you stand up, you bring on some trouble for yourself, but you have to do what's right. You have to do what's right for the country. I will tell you, we are both in this to do what's right for the country. That's one thing I can tell you. He lost his father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated threats to his safety during the course of his campaign while being denied protection by the Harris-Biden administration. And this is a tribute in honor of Bobby. I am announcing tonight that upon my election, I will establish a new independent presidential commission on assassination attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And they will also conduct a rigorous review of the attack last month. But I tell you, I have never had more people ask me, please, sir, release the documents on the Kennedy assassination. And we're going to do that. And I also want to salute Bobby's decades of work as an advocate for the health of our families and our children. Nobody's done more. Millions and millions of Americans who want clean air, clean water, and a healthy nation have concerns about toxins in our environment and pesticides in our food. That's why today I'm repeating my pledge to establish a panel of top experts working with Bobby to investigate what is causing the decades-long increase in chronic health problems and childhood diseases, including autoimmune disorders, autism, obesity, infertility, and many more. We want every child in America to grow up and to live a long and healthy life. So I just want to ask Bobby to speak for a little while. I'll stand aside. I'm going to stand aside. But I can only tell you, I've known him a long time. We've been a little bit on the opposite side of the equation, but I will say this, he is a brilliant, I still think of him as young. He's not that young. I always call him young, but he's not that young. But he is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal man who loves the people of this country as much as anybody can love the people of this country. So, Bobby, please say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you. Now, a few hours after the assassination attempt at Butler, I got a call from a safe food advocate named Kelly Means, who's been fighting for many years to try to end the corruption at CDC and FDA and USDA. And these institutions, these regulatory agencies, are actually run by the big food processing companies, the big ag and the chemical companies that they're supposed to regulate. And he said to me that he'd been advising me for many years and on my campaign. And he told me that night that he was also advising President Trump. And he asked if I would talk to President Trump. And I said, of course. And
That's former President Trump saying he was going to stand aside so RFK Jr. could come in and say a few words at his rally. This is Glendale, Arizona, and it's just hours after RFK Jr. suspended his campaign endorsing former President Trump. You heard a very excited rally screaming Bobby, Bobby, Bobby as he came up to speak to the crowd. I want to bring in Tricia McLaughlin again, bring her back in. Tricia, thanks for staying around. We were talking before about what this endorsement might mean, and now we have the picture of it. We have the video of it, the two men shaking hands on stage. And these, by the way, are two men, as former President Trump just pointed out, have not always been on the same page. Our research says that former President Trump once called him the dumbest member of the Kennedy family. And now they're on stage today. They say politics makes strange bedfellows.
It does. Well, they're both former Democrats as well. But it kind of shows the parallels in these two movements. And I think they are two very separate movements, but kind of that distrust in government that I think a lot of Americans are feeling right now. Distrust in many of our institutions. I think that's why he highlighted we need transparency about some of these assassination attempts, namely RFK's uncle, JFK, talking about the mental health crisis in this country, stopping these forever wars, free speech, censorship. That's where some of this overlap is. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot of RFK talk about. That's what Donald Trump will ask RFK to stump for to reach these undecided and independent voters.
Yeah, and former President Trump making some news, saying that he's going to put together an independent commission on assassinations, as you mentioned, and will release the information that so many in this country have been fascinated by and looking forward to hearing and seeing since the assassination of RFK's uncle, Jack Kennedy, President Kennedy. If you heard Galen Druk from 538 talk about the actual numbers and what this endorsement will really mean for the Trump campaign, it may not be big numbers, but you say that this is going to be so tight that any numbers are important, right?
I mean, look at 2020 when it was a 10,000 vote margin in Arizona. Arizona is a place where RFK performs relatively well, and he might be in those single digits nationally speaking, but hey, 20, 40,000 votes in Arizona could make a huge difference. That could be make or break for this campaign and for this election of who wins.
Yeah, I want to bring Selena Wang back in, and Selena, you're looking at these pictures as well. We should apologize. The transmission coming in is not great, but you're getting the picture, literally. Selena, this is an important picture for the Trump campaign. We know that quietly some of his representatives have been urging RFK Jr. to do this for quite some time.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Trump campaign has been really struggling to refocus this media attention, all of this watchful eyes back onto him, and to steal some of that spotlight away from Vice President Harris. And they're really hoping that this imagery, this endorsement from RFK Jr. is going to bring the attention back to Trump. And since Harris got into this race, Trump has struggled to consistently land attack lines on her. He struggled to define her, and he's tried to throw a whole different bunch of insults at her to try and see what sticks. And his aides have been urging him to stick to the issues. Now, in the early part of this rally, before he got on stage with RFK Jr., he did talk about some of the issues and trying to paint Vice President Harris as a radical left extremist. Now, with RFK up there on that stage, the Trump campaign is hoping this is going to give him a boost in some of those critical battleground states where every single vote is going to count.
Yeah, and we saw RFK's numbers dwindling in recent days, where, the bear issue in Central Park and some of the things that had come out. But here, look at this, the two men hugging here. It is a big moment for former President Trump. The question is, Selena, does it pan out into a bump like after a convention?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the data shows that the net effect of RFK Jr. dropping out and endorsing Trump would be really small. The 538 poll, looking at the difference between polls that include him versus don't include him, shows that it's a very narrow reduction of support for Harris. But again, these battleground states, some of them were won by thousands of votes in 2020. So the Trump campaign is really hoping they can draw those RFK supporters onto their side. But on the other hand, the Harris campaign believes this is going to have a negligible effect, because a lot of his supporters were anti-establishment. They were unhappy with either mainstream choice. So they're betting that a lot of them are just going to stay at home.
All right, Selena Wang, Tricia McLaughlin, thank you both. Do appreciate your time and sticking around for that. That's our show for tonight. I'm Phil Lipoff. ABC News Live is here for you all night with the latest news, context, and analysis. You can always find us on Hulu, Roku, Pluto TV, the ABC News app, and of course, abcnews.com. Have a good night.
Whenever news breaks.
We are here in Israel, a nation at war.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this town.